All right, let's get to it. It's time for today's high-intensity tech training, VMware disruption, and exploring next-gen alternatives for virtualization and cloud migrations. The virtualization landscape, of course, undergoing a seismic shift. There's mounting uncertainty around VMware's roadmap, pricing, and long-term viability. Today, we learn about alternative platform categories, the key factors driving change, and how to evaluate alternatives' performance, scalability, and data protection. Also, migration strategies and how advisors can monetize this shift and provide additional value. I am very happy today to welcome back to our Tuesday call Telarus Field Solutions Engineer and Cloud Architect Chad Muckenfuss. He's joined by a powerhouse panel of industry experts. We've got AJ Kuftik, Field CTO at Expedient, Jeff Slapp, co-founder and CTO at SteelDome, and Kevin Carter, product director at Rackspace Technology. Chad and all, welcome to each of you. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it, Doug.
Important topic today. This has really caused a lot of concern in the industry, but also brought around a lot of opportunity.
It has, definitely. And what I'd like to do to kind of kick things off is really just take us through a timeline review before we have each of our panelists introduce themselves today, and just go over how VMware has changed over the last couple of years, just to set the stage. And then we'll kick it off and go down the row here and have each of them introduce themselves and what they see in the industry happening right now. So just taking a trip back to 2023 and remembering when Broadcom acquired VMware, it was an interesting point in time, and everybody was just kind of questioning, hey, what is this going to look like? And as this took off as an acquisition here. So 2023, Broadcom acquires VMware and immediately lays off 3,000 employees. That was at the end of 2023 when that all came to fruition. 2024, more layoffs continued. They laid off another 1,800 VMware employees, but more importantly, they eliminated 59 different product offerings in the VMware suite of services. And what that changed into was a 3x to 12x cost increase to every customer that was utilizing VMware at that point. And that's where we saw a huge, immediate, very emotional response to this VMware takeover by Broadcom and I need to figure out a way to get off of this. Then things started to settle down and the realization set in by a lot of organizations saying this isn't an easy migration or move off of VMware. And here we are in 2025, and the planning has definitely begun end of 24 and into 25, and Broadcom continues their changes. So this year they went from a 16 core minimum to a 72 core minimum, which once again changed the pricing aspect of things. And most recently, a couple of weeks ago, VMware did away with their program that eliminated essentially 100% of all of their small CSP offerings, and now only a small group of suppliers in our portfolio have the ability to offer VMware in a managed model. So all of these changes are driving and pushing a lot of customers in this space to make changes. And that's why we have our panel here today to offer what those changes look like. So with that review, what I'd like to do is go down the panel here and start with AJ. We'll just do it in alphabetical order. AJ, introduce yourself, what you do specifically for Expedient, and then we'll go down the line here.
So my name is AJ Kuftik. I'm Field CTO here at Expedient. We are a full stack cloud service provider. What I do is a lot of this, partner enablement, front messaging. I've done a lot of our webinars. If you've seen any of our content, you've probably seen my face. Sometimes I'm sorry about that. And this is something that we have spent a lot of time on as a VMware service provider over the last, I don't know now, almost 20 years. We started with the VMware Cloud Service Provider program in 2007. So we've been through this entire process. We did make the cut. So we continue to be able to offer VMware as a service. And we are working with a lot of customers in the field, talking through what are their next steps? What do they need to do going forward?
Great. So moving along, Jeff, can you introduce yourself and SteelDome?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chad, and thanks for everyone for being here. My name is Jeff Slapp. I am a co-founder, CTO, and head of product development here at SteelDome. We are a infrastructure software company, so we focus on, as we'll get into, I'm sure, in great detail here in this session, the underpinnings of the essential technologies that are required for any application, right? Whether that's VMs, containers, AI, everything in between. SteelDome focuses on making the acquisition and deployment of those core technologies as easy and as affordable as possible, regardless of where it is, because it's software, and that's our primary focus: is flexibility, compatibility, and really the democratization efforts around adopting these types of technologies for the enterprise. So great to be here, Chad. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for joining us. And Kevin, last but not least, take us through your role at Rackspace.
Hey everybody, pleasure to be here as well, and thank you very much for having us on this panel and kicking this off. My name is Kevin Carter. I'm the product director for our OpenStack business unit at Rackspace. And if you're not familiar with Rackspace, we're a multi-cloud, multi-solution provider with data centers in and outside of the United States, operating different solutions for customers in a broad portfolio of different systems and services. And my particular role, we are operating our OpenStack solutions, our what we call our open source or open infrastructure solutions for customers, where we'll run it in our data centers, customer data centers, or do a build, operate, transfer models for customers so that they can get off of these proprietary solutions and into an open source, open ecosystem for those future innovations. And so that's the quick TLDR of myself. And again, thank you very much for having me.
Well, we'll stay with you, Kevin, and talk us through that OpenStack offering that you have here and how that benefits customers, and also do you offer the professional services to come alongside those customers and help them with this transition? Take us through what that looks like from your side at Rackspace.
Definitely. So yeah, the open source solutions, OpenStack itself, right, is now part of the Linux Foundation. It was its own standalone foundation, now part of the Linux Foundation, and it really is truly has the mission of empowering the next decade of open innovation and technologies. And we believe in that mission wholeheartedly, not only as a founding member of OpenStack, but also as a current platinum member of the board there as well on OpenStack itself. And so what does that look like? I mean, we offer it in a variety of different models, and those professional services is actually a big part of that, because in the industry, open source or OpenStack engineers are sometimes hard to come by. And so we have a ton of them. We have a lot of the certifications around those capabilities, and we can bring those into customer data centers. I think what's unique about our platform and offering is that it itself is open source. And so when we bring in a customer into the new open source OpenStack ecosystem, we're bringing them on, we're onboarding their applications, we're onboarding their infrastructure in their data center or giving them space and hours, and then training them to operate those different operate the different clouds, efficiently. And that's a big thing. We're basically, making sure that the legacy VMware engineers or the people who don't have that experience with that open ecosystem get that experience. They understand how they can operate the platform and they can take it forward. And so one of the things that I like to say to our teams is that we're building that open ecosystem, but we have to earn their business every single day of the week, because it is open source. It is open. It is open cloud. The code is there publicly, and so there's no vendor lock-in with our solutions. We're bringing them to the platform and then earning their business, like I said, every single day of the week.
That's great. And again, having that open source code, I've worked on that on the voice side early in my career and understanding how that all works. So it's a unique situation for a customer to make a change from a VMware and embrace that model. It opens a lot of doors for them. So thank you for that overview. Jeff, from your side of things and SteelDome, you have something somewhat similar, but on your own side. Can you explain what the offerings are from SteelDome and what you bring to the table?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'll certainly complement what Kevin has already said. Right? As a software company, we have focused on what is bringing, the greatest deal of flexibility and accessibility to the space. And the areas of focus that we have today with regard to the technologies is around Stratus Store, which is we call it the massively scalable, scale out, scale up storage system, but it doesn't have to be the massive scale, right? That's a relative thing. You can start with as small as, a single node, and grow to hundreds of nodes. It doesn't make any difference, horizontally how far you go, because the software was designed to be able to adapt to any of one of those conditions, and really meeting the customer and their requirements, where they are today, knowing that tomorrow the requirements are very likely to change, right? When you're looking at companies that are growing, which if you're a healthy company, you are growing, and you're not going to be in the same place, a year from now or 5 years from now, right? Those requirements are going to change. And usually when you meet those various inflection points, that's where pain is introduced, right? There's a lot of, migration aspects, operational challenges, diversity within in the environment, which makes that very difficult to operate over a particular life cycle, right? Whether that's 5, 7, 10 years, whatever the case is. So storage is a very important aspect, and one that if I was to roll back in my career, if you were to categorize, compute, storage, and networking, I would definitely, from my perspective, I've been very focused on storage most of my career, followed by compute and then networking. It's all very, very important, but at the end of the day, when you look at a lot of the traditional hardware vendors out there, right, and we all know the names, you've seen a shift over the last 5 to 10 years or so, going from advertising as a hardware vendor to now as a software vendor, even though they still largely make hardware, because hardware is in general very largely commoditized, and software now differentiates. So again, going back to the SteelDome side of this, so our primary focus has been just like when you build a house, right? You focus first on the foundation, and then you build the rest of the structure, and then you do the finer details, and that's really how our stack is laid out in a very modular way to allow for adaptation to any one of those layers. So once the storage has been taken care of with StrataStore, then StrataServe, which is our hypervisor, which is our VM hypervisor and management, and also container runtime and management layer. And again, the customer has choice depending on what they need to do. And everything's an on-off switch. So you don't have to be necessarily an expert in any one of these areas, although all of that, all the apparatus that underlies all those technologies are still there if you really want to get into power user mode, if you will. But we've actually shielded the user at various levels from all that complexity, because that's one of the largest barriers to adoption. It's not that the technology concept is new in terms of clustering and scaling and what I call software-defined 2.0, now that we're into this new era of really software-defined at scale. It was really the challenges around how do you implement, what are the best practices, how long does it take, how much expertise does it take, and obviously the capital expenditure and operational expenditure to make all that happen, right? So that time to value matters. So once you have both of those in place, now you can pretty much go anywhere you need based on the business requirements or the application demands or the various pressure points within the organization. And we don't talk about life cycle that much. Because the software really doesn't have a life cycle per se, right? Normally, a hardware life cycle is typically 5 years. We have a rolling release cycle, so that there's no more rip and replace, there's no more data migrations, there's no more disruption, there's no more concerns about performance and what that might be down the road, or scale and what that might be down the road. All of those things, because the system is extremely flexible in nature and modular in nature, can adapt to whatever those conditions are. So that's the quickest one breath description I can give you at this point.
That was a heck of a breath. I don't ever want to scuba dive with you.
I do that a lot.
No, I appreciate that. And both, you and Kevin both described unique OSs, for lack of a better term, but unique operating systems and unique virtual machines that are really tailored to the customer's needs, more than just, hey, you have to fit within this box in order to operate the way that we, as the software provider, are telling you to operate. It's more of the software is molded to what the customer needs, along with riding on or residing on the hardware that is specific to those needs as well.
Yeah.
And again, we're going to hear from AJ here in a moment, but again, the cost factor is somewhat changed from that whole, again, CapEx model of I've got to go buy $200,000 worth of servers every 5 years, or put that into a lease purchase agreement, that type of thing. Now it's not really an issue. It's a monthly cost factor. And then again, just continuing to grow the business and focus on that growth model as opposed to worrying about an infrastructure type of situation. So yeah, I think it's great. And two great unique alternatives here. And as we transition over to AJ, you, AJ, are in a unique position as well because you are still a very large VMware organization,
Yep.
but you also have one of their largest competitors on, and you're extremely large in Nutanix as well. So
Yep.
can you go into, and then we'll address, there's a question in the chat here, and we're happy to address questions as this goes along. But can you take us through where Expedient is and what your mindset is towards all of this?
So being a longtime VMware provider, Rackspace is as well. So I don't want to say like, oh, hey, we're the only one here. Rackspace does this as well. The big thing that we've seen over this period of time, especially with the acquisition happening, is a lot of people reevaluating the math. And a lot of this isn't just my perpetual license. This is the other piece of this is the perpetual license went away. So you bought your license once and then you just paid like a much smaller amount for support over time. The big thing that they did was by switching to a subscription model, it now means that people are paying effectively the full license price and support every single month. That's where a lot of that cost increase really comes from, especially when it comes time for support renewal. You're going from this teeny tiny amount based on licenses you bought potentially a decade ago to now I have to rebuy all my licenses in essence. So I think a lot of the pain point was there. I think one of the other things VMware did not do a really great job of was explaining the value at all. They kind of announced all the price increases first and then tried to backload it with what are you getting out of that instead of saying, hey, this is all the stuff we're doing and now here's the price difference. So I think had they done it in the opposite direction, they probably would have had less heartburn in the field. The big thing though that we saw was there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be upset about this. And we started working on Nutanix support when the acquisition was originally announced in 2022. Because we knew there's going to be some people who are going to be like, no, nope, I am not doing this. I am switching. I'm going somewhere else. And those switches do take time. The other part of this is we saw a lot of organizations, especially last year, who were kind of under duress. They got their bill, their renewal, and they didn't have a year to plan. They didn't have 2 years to plan. They had 2 months. And I've been through a lot of these before. That's why I have all the gray and none of this. And that's why a lot of times we see when you try to do a migration quickly, it doesn't work or it causes impacts to the business. The risk is too high. And so a lot of organizations signed 1-year agreements or they signed 3-year agreements and they said, you know what, we'll get them in 3 years. Now, I've also been through a lot of those too. At a former employer of mine, Oracle would come around every 3 years and say, hey, it's renewal time. And everybody would run around with their hair on fire and say, hey, we got to get everything we can off of Oracle. And then we'd get everything we can off of Oracle. And then they would go, all right, fine. This is what we're signing. This is the lowered amount because this is all of what we have. And they would sign that and they say, in 3 years, we're not doing this again. And everyone would forget about it until 2 years and like 9 months. And then we'd do it all over again. And so a lot of organizations, when we started talking to them last year was if you signed a renewal in 2025 or even 2024, you need to start planning what your renewal in 3 years is going to be. Is it going to be just a straight up renewal because you like what VMware is doing? And I would say that they are doing a lot of really great things. These are things they should have been doing for the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. Of VMware Cloud Foundation is not a new product. It was released in 2018. I was one of the first customers of it. I can tell you right now, it's actually very good. And what they did when they developed it was kind of amazing if you knew what was going on inside of VMware. They were effectively 6 different businesses, and they got it all together for this one product. So a lot of that is now being rolled forward. A lot of it is being put together. You don't have 6 or 7 different products. There is a lot of value across that portfolio. On the flip side of that, we have Nutanix. Nutanix is the main vendor who was going at VMware feature for the last 10 years. And that was very clearly their main competitor. They very clearly were like 1A, 1B. And since then, we've seen a lot of organizations looking at them because they fit into the ecosystem that customer has. Their backups, their storage, their monitoring, their tooling, their ticketing systems. A lot of organizations that we talk to are not necessarily prepared to make a huge jump. Just to pull the curtain back, we did have a prep call and we all kind of agreed I can throw a rock and hit a VMware engineer. My walls are rubber. It'll just hit me. But if I throw the rock, I can hit a VMware engineer. Hyper-V, less so. Kevin, OpenStack, there's talent out there, but it's nowhere near the quantity of VMware engineering talent, because that's been the de facto standard. I think the stat was like 85% of companies were running VMware or ESXi and vSphere at in some form or fashion. So it's talking about moving away from the de facto standard and what was like the number one supported option for this entire ecosystem of things. And how do you fit into that? How does that fit into your DR strategy? One of the big things that we can do as a service provider is provide flexible licensing for our DR services, where it's not in use, you're not paying for it. So there are ways for us to alleviate some of the pain that we see from the industry. I did see one of the questions in there: Can Expedient do licensing and renewal for existing on-premise server environments? The answer to that is no. This was actually one of the big changes that came out of the last the last big announcement, which was the elimination of white label licensing, which was to service up from larger service providers to smaller service providers. That was a big one that came out. But also, we don't want to be in the license reselling business. We are a service provider. I'll say this: we don't make any more money selling VMware licenses, right? VMware has their cost. We have our cost. It's not much different, I'll be honest. And a lot of this comes down to being able to leverage this as a way to move to an OpEx model into a service provider model, because I can tell every IT director and CIO right now what their work is for next year. Everybody's talking about AI, so you have to put your focus on that. You have whatever the business is going to come up with in terms of these are the things that we need to do to improve efficiency, et cetera. Most that's going to be tied to AI, and you still have to maintain everything you're doing. Those lights have to stay on. You don't get a choice in that. Your projects are dead last on that list. You don't get to take those away. Like your projects, they get put in the back burner very, very quickly. Your patching doesn't. So if you want to move that up the stack and keep your things and your improvements going that you want to make as a department and as an IT organization, this is where leveraging the service provider space comes in, because we're taking care of that hardware. I'm managing that relationship with Broadcom. I'm managing that relationship with Nutanix, so that you can focus on how are you delivering outcomes to your company? How are you delivering that efficiency? How are you delivering those resources? And if you can leverage technology stacks that you recognize today and that your team already knows today, you can get that bigger jump and not have to worry about, okay, well, this is a really great technology, but I'm not really sure if my people are going to get it. I'm not really sure if this is going to work out for us. And a lot of organizations don't want to take a ton of risk, especially right now. So this is a way to take a much lower risk jump from managing things on-prem. And, Chad, you mentioned it. Nobody wants to pay $200K for hardware every 4 or 5 years. This is where the service provider space really comes in. And that's why companies like us at Expedient can help along that path.
Yeah. Thank you, AJ. I think that's a great transition into, the next part of this conversation, because I see both Kevin and Jeff nodding their heads in moving to this OpEx model of allowing IT managers, CIOs, all that type of thing to move their projects up that stack. Jeff, can you talk here about coming alongside companies that are willing to make this transition and are being guided by their TAs to this type of transition, and how your setup has helped those IT organizations really kind of move their projects up the stack, to AJ's point?
Yeah. No, that's great perspective. So, again, as a purely software-driven organization, we are very interested in, again, not only removing the barriers and making it easy and getting people essentially out of the trenches, dealing with the time-consuming and costly technicals around deploying and operating the technology, and just getting to work on whatever the thing is that they're trying to do, whatever their mission is, right? Focusing on the applications and what they're trying to achieve. But what's interesting is that with software, and this is really a philosophy, I can't say that it is across the board for every software company, but certainly for SteelDome, one of our primary missions among many is to allow organizations to go where they need to go based on their requirements, right? We're not in the business of dictating, you must do this, you must do it in this silo, or this silo, or this silo, or as the industry has dubbed, the various t-shirt sizes that you have to choose from, right? The software, if done right, should be able to take you wherever your requirements go, whether that's, financial requirements, operational requirements, et cetera. And you should be able to do that anywhere, right? Of course, software needs hardware to run, and being, hardware agnostic, taking that approach from a software perspective, of course, is kind of goes without saying, but we have to say it because there's some nuance there. Again, like I had mentioned before, it doesn't matter where you start or where you're going. That's all based on your requirements, and that's really kind of our focus there. So when we talk with clients, a lot of times, first of all, we're not the first one to talk, right? We're the first one to listen because every customer requirement and every conversation is completely novel, across the board, right? I've been involved in thousands of conversations over my career, and I have not heard the same one once, right? It's all different. So being now in the position of delivering software that can say, listen, okay, based on what I've heard, based on where you are today, based on where you want to go tomorrow, this is what the software can do in terms of being able to fulfill that mission. And also, hopefully, if we've done this right, which so far it is proven to be true, that we can reduce the cost. Again, these barriers that I talked about earlier, the technical overhead, the cost, the time to implement, because again, we are focused on getting customers, primarily out of the weeds and focused on what matters most, which is delivering results and delivering outcomes, sooner rather than later. And that's very key. So regardless of whether we're talking about public cloud, building your own private cloud, running at the edge, running literally on-prem, if that's still a thing, right? Over the years, if you look back, there's multiple pendulum swings that we see in technology. Pendulum swings that happened within the box itself, right? The CPU, the memory, the disk, the network. And one thing pressures another thing, which pressures another thing, which pressures another thing, and then it comes back around again. And then you have the pressure and the pendulum swing of scale, right? We went from on-prem to public cloud, back to the edge, back to the public cloud, and there's all these different pressure points. And now AI, which is probably the most significant development in the recent years, which we're very much involved with. There's this idea of now sovereignty, right? Because of the sensitivity of the data that these AI models use. Companies are shifting from using simulated AI models now, which could run basically anywhere because there was no proprietary or super sensitive information that was running there. So there was no concern about trust and who could see the data. But now, as these models are demanding more accuracy, they actually are now operating on real customer data, sensitive data, whether that's financial or healthcare or otherwise. So there's this sovereignty shift now that's happening. But the problem is that in order to make that a sovereign type of infrastructure, that means that you have to do things yourself in some form or fashion. And doing those things, again, they're very, very technical and they're very time consuming and they cost a lot of money typically to deploy. So that's really what the focus is around driving software to alleviate a lot of those barriers. So that is where we see, again, when I use the word democratization, that's what I mean by that, is now taking technology that the Fortune 2000s really have access to and making that accessible to anybody because it doesn't require them to have massive budgets and it doesn't require them to have a lot of in-house expertise to do it, right? Anybody could do it. And if we've done it right, then that's really what we've achieved in the industry. And that's what we're seeing today. So
great. And going over, Kevin, as Jeff is talking about this and talking about the ability to come in, I don't want to say regardless of budget, but it's not a necessarily budget constraint situation for smaller organizations to now leverage cloud. As we get into all of this and get into this discussion here a little bit deeper, and we've got about 10 minutes left to handle some of the Q&A here, but talk about your transition, maybe a real world example here in a couple of minutes of what you've done to help a customer move from the VMware space over. And then AJ's politely raising his hand to join in the conversation here too, and we can address these questions. So we've got 10 minutes here. We're going to address the questions, but take us through, Kevin, a win that you've had here, and quickly, and then we'll hit the questions.
Absolutely. I mean, so with everything that we've talked about so far definitely deeply resonates with everything that we're also seeing in the market as well. People trying to move up the stack, trying to figure out hybrid, trying to figure out on-prem. And one of the things that we do with our product strategy and portfolio is that we have an enterprise, a business segment, and a flex segment. And that what that does is that makes it so that I can run different OpenStack workloads on-prem in a customer environment. I can do it in our data center. I can give them a truly, shared control plane, dedicated compute experience, and I can also give them a fully multi-tenant environment. But the big sticking factor across those three things is the fact that they're all using the same API and the same capabilities there. And so when a customer is coming in and they're running those enterprise workloads and they need that burstable compute capability, or they need help moving workloads easily into a multi-tenant environment so that they can refactor their hardware footprint, change things around a little bit and then redeploy their enterprise stack on top of it for that on-prem, that unified API experience gives customers that quite literally that sticky factor, that capability that they're looking for. And in that win space, right, that is the customers who are doing exactly what I just described. And a lot of customers they've got HP Gen 9 gear, they've got old Supermicro kit, they've got Dell R740s or brand new 7626 servers, right? It's a mix of this, totally, mixed environment. And they're trying to repurpose that CapEx in new, meaningful ways because of this rug pull that's happened for them. And so a lot of these customers are coming in and they're looking at different technology solutions and saying, this all sounds great. I want everything that you're talking about. Can you do it on a R710? And some of the I would probably try to talk them out of running it on some of that older hardware. But the reality is that some of the times those older machines are mission critical to their applications. They don't have the additional money to go buy new hardware or capabilities. And so the open source ecosystem that we're putting out there, that we're working on, has a very similar we'll call it strategic appeal to being able to put down modern software on older hardware, get them through these, tumultuous times, and then repurpose those applications or put new hardware in place as they grow. And we can do that in a mixed environment, creating availability zones and aggregates and things like that. And so I can't give you specific customer names on where we've had these wins, but I can tell you that we're doing exactly this on a pretty daily basis for customers, where they're figuring out how to shift an application, learning the APIs, repurposing hardware in their data centers, and then pulling it all back. And John in the questions talking about AI, right, and the sovereignty of that data, that's paramount to everything that we're doing. It's table stakes, right? It's like Jeff's working on the storage components and capabilities there. Data is reality for all things going forward. It always it's the old saying that metadata is data, right? But data is what is really separating customers being able to be successful or not, and rapid access to that, and having the sovereignty of that data in their environments. And so being able to have those different breakpoints across the different stack, to have that hybrid experience, but keep their secure data in their secure environments, in their four walls, is really a paramount thing. And I think that we do it pretty well in terms of how we address it with these open ecosystems. But it's definitely something that we're seeing in the market, and that success is growing. It's a crescendo of success that's happening.
Great. So going further into the questions here, and appreciate getting a really deep dive into what each of your specific offerings has and what it brings to the table that's a little bit more unique to each one of you. But going in here, John, as you mentioned, Kevin here, John mentioned the hybrid model, where some of the information is being kept on-prem. They like that because of the security aspect to it. Again, we're going to have to keep these answers short and sweet, but starting with AJ, what are your thoughts on the AI model and security in and around that? Because AI is driving the conversation, even though in the back room somewhere under a water heater or something like that is an AS400 in a lot of companies still. AI is the topic of conversation currently. So what are you seeing there?
Yeah, and this is, I think, one of the things that we as a service provider help with. So we actually rolled out our own suite of AI tooling that leverages public models to connect to private data. But what I have seen is that a lot of organizations struggle with getting out of their own way. And that's why I think a lot of this shift of moving focus away from whatever Broadcom has done now to cause a lot of heartburn to moving into, is that something I want to use going forward? Do I want to move over to a platform like Nutanix or even the platforms offered by the other members of the panel here? But moving away from that level of focus allows you to focus on the things that the business is really asking for. The C-suite only cares about Broadcom stuff because of the price increase. That's it. Otherwise, if there was no change in the price, they wouldn't be talking about anything that way. The AI piece, though, comes into play and say, hey, I want to go do these things, but data is really important. How do I make sure that that's all secured? We built an entire platform in terms of storing data securely, HIPAA High Trust certified, having attestations with all of the various public models, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, and Perplexity, to be able to say, let's bring in the best tools that people know and like with the data that they actually use and need. And this is something where by putting those tools together, we're able to handle both the patching and maintenance of the infrastructure. So the worry and the time constraint or the time burden comes off, and that focus can go over there, but we're helping on both sides. So we're helping solve their tactical problems today of where do I run my workloads? And then where do I see my business leveraging AI going forward? And I think that is a huge differentiator for us in the space, because we are trying to get people to the solution to their problem, not the solution to what their resource needs are. We can provide the resources, we can provide the staff, we can provide the support around that. But this is where the difference really turns into, hey, here's a full suite of services to work off of, and also looking at things like disaster recovery and data protection. One of the things we're now looking at is resilient AI. All of that data that's super duper important, is it all protected? Are you backing up your Office 365 data correctly? If that's where the majority of your data lives, like 75% of our customers are leveraging the SharePoint connector from us. That's a big deal. So how do we make sure that Office 365 backups are happening properly and correctly, so that in the event that something goes terribly wrong and Microsoft blows up Office 365 or something, that all of that data is protected and can be restored somewhere else? That is a huge thing that people are now starting to turn their focus to in terms of, how do I make sure that my business can continue to take advantage of the value that's coming out of these AI tools?
So, Jeff, we're going to pivot a little bit here to answer one of the other questions, which I think fits into your wheelhouse here. Brian Walsh asks, in your opinion, where do you see the hypervisors playing a role in AI compute? Isn't there less importance on using hypervisors in an AI landscape?
Yeah, it's all over the map because it depends on what the customer's doing. That's a great question. So some of the workloads do reside in the VM space, and we have part of our stack is to build in a very high level of security. So the confidential computing framework that we have, that the industry is basically standardized on, which does require it's all modern based processors that support this capability, but there's offload capabilities and hardware requirements around that. But that provides, in-memory encryption, complete, VM to kernel isolation, all sorts of things to support that space. But the large part of AI workloads do reside in container-based workloads typically, just because that's how they were originally designed to be deployed and deployed at scale. So the platform supports being able to do both of those things, depending on what your needs are. And really, that's largely going to be centered around how you want to leverage the specific AI-based hardware, the GPUs and everything related to that. So being able to either pass through hardware, pass through the GPU to the VMs, or to virtualize or to essentially slice the GPUs into smaller pieces that can be shared amongst many. Very similar to how containers work. The platform will support both of those and meet you again where you're currently at, because everybody's requirements are slightly different. Again, the AI landscape is very, very broad. There's thousands of moving parts, and that's really the last thing I'll say here to keep my answer short. One of the analogies I like to use is it's particularly around AI, right? A lot of companies talk about how they want to go down that road, they want to implement these technologies, but they don't even have the first idea where to begin. It's like someone literally just dropped 1,000 car parts in your driveway and said, okay, have fun putting that together. But the difference is that our operating system will take those pieces and then ask you, what do you want to build? Do you want a four-door sedan? Do you want a Ferrari? Do you want an 18-wheeler? And it will self-assemble itself into that construct so that the customer doesn't have to worry about how do I put it together and all of the nuances around making that engine work. Because really, AI is just another application, albeit a very highly specialized one. It's another application that has very specific requirements. And taking the guesswork out of what's required to support that application, right? The framework underneath, again, is one of the principal missions of the software to be able to get the customer there quicker so they can actually get to work doing meaningful things rather than, assembling and piecing together and testing and then undoing and redoing again. All that time is wasted. Just get to the end result and get focused on the application and the end result that you want to actually drive to with the AI frameworks that you're deploying. So.
Well, I see Doug here. That means we're coming to the end of our time. So, again, I want to thank Kevin, Jeff, and AJ specifically. We're happy to continue this conversation offline. I know Talaris, the marketing team, will provide all of our contact information, but this is what we see in the marketplace, and we really appreciate all three of you being a part of the HITT series today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Doug to move on to the rest of the show.
Thanks so much, Chad. Great presentation. Appreciate you and all of our panelists today.